Good afternoon. Hi. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 16, which digs into strategic launch planning, but from a fairly high level. This is going to be a conversation more about the vision for your new product. And then in Chapter 17, we'll continue this discussion with more of the specific tactical issues related to a product launch. Okay, so first of all, when you're talking about a product launch, you have a number of decisions to make. The strategic decisions are more higher level decisions relating to who you're going to be selling your product to, how you're going to go about selling it at a high level picture sort of a level, and the platform you're going to sell the product on, the tone you're going to set for this product, positioning for it, that sort of thing. Tactical launch decisions are more specific and relate more to your marketing mix, and we'll dig into those more with Chapter 17. And one thing we'll say before we start into this conversation is that there will be some, at this level in the game, at this stage in the game, with the product launch or with the release of a new product, we've come quite a ways down the road. And so there are specific givens at this point, strategic givens, that may be operating. These might be defined in the pick. They might be undefined sorts of things that everybody just knows or takes for granted. And so to the extent that you can define those and put them in the pick, that's a good idea. But just be aware that there will or could be some facts related to your product launch that aren't necessarily spoken or made deliberate in that way. All right, so moving on. First decision, who are we going to sell our product to? This is a target market decision. For however this is defined, you will need to get your arms around the market potential for the group of people you're selling to. You will need to make sure you've got a good match between your product and the needs of the market, or particularly the needs of the market segment that you're looking at. And finally, you need to be sure that you as a company can be competitive in releasing this product into that market. So those three things are must-dos, must-haves. Okay, so beyond that, you are probably familiar with market segmentation from earlier classes in marketing, but they apply here to the product launch as well. You need to be real clear about what exactly you're looking for in the group of people you're marketing to. And so you could be defining your product, your target market based on how the consumer is going to actually use your product. It could be based on a geographic or a demographic quality, an age category, or urban city dwellers could be the sort of people you're targeting. Behavioral and psychographic qualities, attitudes, lifestyles, that kind of thing. Benefit segmentation is going to have to do with the needs that are being served, or the particular benefits that somebody is looking for, a consumer is looking for out of a product. And then finally, micro-marketing can be very successful, but this involves choosing a very small market. And also you'll see a lot of mass customization anymore too, where products are designed in a way that allows for some customization of the product to meet the needs of potentially different groups. And so you'll see more conversation about these in the book as well. Just want to kind of cover them here at a high level. Okay, so moving on. When you're talking about a new product being released into the market, this concept of diffusion comes into play. And the idea here is that you're releasing a new product into a market that is not aware of this product. And so you're having to educate a group of people to some extent about the product that you're giving them. And so the characteristics of your product are important, and the people that you're introducing the product to are important. And so first of all, with respect to characteristics, to the extent you have a product that has a competitive advantage over other substitute products, diffusion of your product into the marketplace will be easier. Similarly, if you have a product that is compatible with the user's ideas or frame of reference for what the product does and how it's used, that makes the product diffusion easier as well. If the product is very complex, that's going to make diffusion harder. And finally, if you can give users a chance to try your product and actually test drive it in a sense, that'll help diffusion as well. As far as the categories of adopters or consumers that are more willing to adopt new products, you want to try to get your new product into the hands of innovators and early adopters. And so these are people that tend to be more cosmopolitan, more adventurous, more social. They're more concerned to have the latest and greatest things. They're likely to be higher income, more of a privileged economic category. And so if you can get your product into these people's hands, it'll help the diffusion process. All right, so moving on, let me back up here and just say this particular model, diffusion of innovation model, was one that was put forth by a guy named Everett Rogers. Okay, so there's another model of diffusion put out by a guy named Jeffrey Moore. And so they're similar in that they have the same categories of adopters, but in Moore's model, what he's saying here is that the expectations of the early adopters and the innovators is vastly different from the expectations of the other categories of adopters. And so as a company, if you ever want to get your product into a place of acceptance with the non-innovators and the non-early adopters, you want to have a product that is more practical. These other groups of adopters tend to be more practical. They tend to want a better value in a product. And so that to the extent you can create an argument with that group that speaks to that, that talks to the product's value and the practicality of it, you're more likely to cross the chasm, however you want to say that, jump the divide, in other words, and get past the innovator and early adopter groups and get your product into the hands of all those many other consumers. All right. Product positioning is a very basic, major element when it comes to releasing a new product. Basically, product positioning answers the question, you should buy our product because of this reason. So if you can kind of keep that phrase in your mind, that'll help you understand product positioning. So there are two basic ways that you can position your product. You can either argue for it based on its attributes, or you can argue for it leveraging surrogates. So if you're arguing for a new product in your communications, based on attributes, you're saying, my product has these features, it functions this way, it gives you these benefits. And those can be very powerful arguments. You can also argue based on what other people are saying about your product. So you should use our product because the experts say this is the best aspirin on the market. Or you should use our product because Michael Jordan says these are his favorite tennis shoes. So very different approach, arguing for based on attributes versus leveraging surrogates. But in either case, what you're really doing here is you're creating in the minds of consumers some sort of value around your product. And that value is not just the core benefit of the product, but it's all of the ancillary things that can go with the product, including the packaging that you put your product in, the service you provide with your product, and the image that you can create or that you're able to create for your product, the prestige that you can associate in consumers' minds with owning it or using your product. So those things all go together with positioning. And also brand management. So if you are positioning your product in a certain way, what you're really doing here is building a value associated with the brand for your product. And so On the legal side of brand management, it's very important that you protect the trademark associated with the brand, which is a word, a symbol, it could be even a sound that you can identify, that you put out there with your product to the extent that users will end up associating this thing, name, word, sound with your product. And you want to register that because legally, the first person to use this word, sound, name has exclusive rights to the product or to that trademark. But if you register it and you're able to register it, then you get to use it forever. And so to the extent that you're able to protect that brand, it can take you a long ways down the road to protecting your brand equity, which is the value that you're able to build around the brand. And think with a long-term eye here. 10 years down the road, if you have managed to build an extremely successful brand, you're going to have a lot of competitors trying to knock that down or copy it. And so you want to have that brand protected as much as you can from a legal aspect. All right, so this chapter has a lot of terms in it. There's a lot of information in this chapter, so I'm kind of hitting the highlights, but I just want to be sure to mention some of these. And you'll want to go, and read more about these in the book. But just to kind of hit these real quickly, a brand name is a tricky thing to set. There's so much information out there about how to go about setting a brand name and so much psychology around it. But really, a brand name can be anything. But there are some guidelines to picking a brand name that's smart, that people can say, that is associated with something that's positive. So I'll let you read more about that. But once you have a brand and you're able to build some value around it, then what you can do is you can actually use that brand name in releasing additional products to your line and leverage that brand name with a brand extension. So, you start to develop a family of products that will have the same name associated with it. You may have one product in your line that you consider a flagship sort of a brand that is one that everybody knows about, but and more ancillary products that go with that brand as well. You may have an umbrella brand name like Kellogg's, for example, that goes on every product in your line. Or you may decide to brand your products individually, like Procter & Gamble with Tide laundry soap versus other kinds of laundry soap that they make and other kinds of detergent products and household good products. Okay, so also think globally now. You're likely going to be selling your product all over the world, and so different global markets are going to have different tweaks to them with respect to what names mean and what colors mean and things like that. And so it may be necessary for you to adapt your brand strategy in each different country you go into. Or you may really want to have a standardized brand that you carry into every single market in the world. And so that's a more efficient way to go about your branding effort if it makes sense for the countries that you're going into and the brand that you're able to actually define and build, if it works in all those countries. If you have a global brand leadership strategy, what you're saying here is that you have looked at your position in all of the markets around the world, and you have done everything you can to align those so that your brand is consistent in every market and it works in every market and it's coordinated in every market. All right, so know something about those terms. And finally, packaging is quite important to the development of a brand and to the release of your product. And so packaging serves a lot of different functions. It protects your product, it contains your product, but it also communicates with consumers about your product, about the contents of the product, but also about the image of your product, the value it has for them. And so marketers will take a lot of advantage of their options when it comes to packaging, and it can be very strategic. So also know too that you have multiple levels of packaging, and so you have the packaging that it goes directly around the product itself. The book will say the pill bottle goes right around the pills. And then the secondary level of packaging is the box that the pill bottle goes in. And so if you're packaging multiple pill boxes together, that's a third level of packaging or a tertiary level. So again, packaging can be quite strategic, and it does kind of roll into the bigger vision for how you're planning to launch your product. So we've covered this real quickly, but I'm going to end there for Chapter 16, and we'll move on next time with the more specific level of strategic launch considerations in Chapter 17. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.